I still remember the smell first. Not the usual mix of beer and bleach you get in the bars around La Latina on a Saturday night. This one had a cold metallic edge that didn't belong there, like someone had opened a drawer full of old coins. The music was still playing when I walked in, some reggaeton track vibrating through a speaker that looked ready to fall off the wall. People were pretending not to look at the body on the floor, pretending badly. The victim was lying between two overturned stools, legs curled the wrong way, shirt barely wrinkled. Too clean for a bar fight, too neat. The knife was a few centimeters from his hand, blade pointing toward the door, as if it had made its own escape attempt. And the bartender, he barely glanced at the corpse. His eyes stayed locked on Mistetti, calculating like he was waiting to see which version of the story I'd choose. An officer I barely knew, Jung, nervous, stepped up beside me. "Inspector, looks like a simple acuchillado. Drunk fight," he said. I could hear the relief in his voice. Easy paperwork, quick closure, forgettable. But nothing about the scene made sense. And that was the problem. Because that night in the bar in Madrid, I could already feel the pressure in the air, the kind that comes from above, not from the streets. The kind that tells you the story has already been written and you're just supposed to sign it. I'm Inspector Javier Roldan, Policía Nacional. Mid-40s, 2 decades in homicide, most of them in Madrid. I've seen enough real bar fights to know what they look like. They're messy, noisy, stupid. Glass everywhere. Blood smeared across walls. People crying, shaking, yelling. This scene wasn't that. This scene was tidy, composed, staged. The victim was a mid-level accountant named Diego Montalban, 42 years old, married, no criminal record, no drugs, no known debts. A man who should have been home by midnight, not bleeding on a sticky floor between half-empty glasses. His wallet was still on him. So were his keys, his phone, and a folded business card from Constructora Villasol, a construction company I'd never heard of, but would soon learn more about than I ever wanted to. According to the bartender, Diego had argued with an unknown man drunk, very drunk, he insisted. And then the man pulled a knife and stabbed him once before running out. Simple, clean, a one-line police report, too clean. When forensics arrived, they took one look and nodded along. "Looks routine, Inspector," the tech said. Even my jefe called the scene before I finished walking it. "Write it as an alcohol-related homicide, Javier. Don't overcomplicate it." Overcomplicate it. I love that word. It usually means stop asking questions. But there was one thing I couldn't shake: the blood trail. It started near the door, not where Diego was lying. Someone had moved him, and whoever staged it wanted us to believe otherwise. On paper, it was routine, but the blood was on the wrong side of the room. And that was where everything really began. The morning after the stabbing, the bar smelled of boredom and stale beer. Daylight always strips bars of their lies. The owner unlocked the place with a sigh when he saw me, the kind you give a tax inspector. He claimed he'd already told the night shift everything. I told him I wanted to hear it again, this time without the music and alcohol. The bartender from the night before stood behind the counter polishing a glass that didn't need polishing. Mid-30s, shaved head, the kind of guy who knows how to throw someone out without leaving marks. "Walk me through it again," I said. He repeated the exact same sequence from his statement. Same phrases, same timing, same pauses. Too perfect. Real memories wobble. Lies rehearse. The waitress, a slim young woman with red nails and tired eyes, told the same story almost word for word. "Yes, Inspector," they argued. "Yes." The drunk guy was loud. "Yes, he stabbed him and ran." Scripted, smooth, like someone had coached them. I pressed a little. "What were they arguing about?" She blinked. A half-second delay. "Money, I think." "You think or you heard?" Another delay. He yelled something about payment. Strange thing. The bartender had said the same word payment, but with the confidence of a man quoting a script he'd memorized. I thanked them and walked out before their faces could tell me anything else. Sometimes staying too long in a lie lets it grow legs. At the victim's apartment in Carabanchel, the air smelled like incense and orderly living. His wife, Marissa, opened the door with the kind of grief you see when someone has cried all night but kept their posture for the neighbors. He wasn't a fighter, she told me. Diego hated conflict. He'd walk an extra block just to avoid a loud group. That fit the man I'd seen on the floor. No defensive wounds, no broken knuckles. But something else fit too. The faint marks of a missing USB drive slot in his desk drawer and a freshly reorganized filing cabinet. One of those half-moon gaps people leave when they remove a folder in a hurry but try to hide it. Did he work last night? I asked. He left after dinner, said he needed to finish a client review. Her lips tightened, but he didn't take his laptop. People don't do client reviews in bars without their laptops. Before leaving, I gently asked about the construction company. She stiffened. He did occasional auditing for them, she said, eyes narrowing with a warning. It wasn't important. Most people don't warn you about things that aren't important. Back at the comisaria, I checked the bar's CCTV footage. A perfect 17-minute gap right over the time of death. Not a glitch. Too clean for random technical failure. The camera restarted exactly when Diego collapsed. Conveniently. I ordered a tech to check the device logs, but hours later my report came back inconclusive. Too fast. Too tidy. Another script. That afternoon I visited Martin, the victim's boss at the accounting firm. Nervous energy, tie too tight, hands tapping on the desk. He did some freelance work for Constructora Villasol, Martin said, to help with extra bills. Were the jobs official? Well, he invoiced privately, private invoices, extra cash flow, construction money. Always a toxic mix in this city. When I asked to see Diego's files, Martin showed me a folder full of very normal, very boring accounts. Too boring, like someone had scrubbed the spicy parts overnight. I noticed the trash bin under his desk. Shredded paper. Financial records have a smelling and desperation. I picked up a stray strip. A sequence of numbers, dates, and a company name cut off halfway through. Shell company? Offshore payments? Probably. Enough to raise questions. Martin tried to smile. This won't become something complicated, right? People always fear complexity when they already know the truth is worse. Late that evening, the forensic called. Inspector, the time of death. It doesn't match the statement. How off? Diego died almost an hour before witnesses claimed the fight happened. There it was. The first real twist, sitting like a stone in my stomach. He didn't die in that bar, I said quietly. I didn't say that, the forensic replied, but I didn't need to. I hung up and stared at the white wall in the corridor of the comisaria. The truth was pushing through the cracks, and someone was trying to plaster over it quickly. I wrote a short internal note. Possible stage scene. Victim involved in financial irregularities. Connection to construction company. I barely saved the file when my jefe called me into his office. He closed the door, sat down, and tapped the note on his laptop screen. Javier, he sighed. We don't need to go down the financial route. Keep it simple. Bar fight, alcohol, easy. And the time of death discrepancy? I asked. Don't overthink it. That phrase again. Don't overthink. Don't ask. Don't look. Which is exactly what I plan to do. I walked back to my desk with the kind of anger that doesn't show on the face, only in the jaw and the breathing. I looked at the folder. Someone had already moved it slightly, 5 millimeters maybe. But enough for a detective who's cleaned up more scenes than birthday dinners. Something was wrong inside the comisaria, and by the next morning, one of my witness contacts had suddenly left Madrid, just gone. The stakes had officially risen. By Monday morning, the case file already felt radioactive. Colleagues avoided eye contact, even the ones who usually asked about my weekend. In our line of work, silence is louder than shouting. It tells you people know something you don't, or worse, that they know exactly what you're about to find out. My jefe, Comisario Vidal, asked for me again. His door was half open when I approached, but he closed it behind me like we were entering a confessional. "Javier, sit," he said. He didn't look tired. He looked rehearsed. People forget that cops can act too, just usually not well. He folded his hands. "There's a lot of noise around this case already. I'm asking you, man to man, don't push where you don't have to. The family needs closure. The city needs simplicity. And you?" He hesitated. "You don't need a headache." "When was the last time a simple case needed this much talking?" I asked. He exhaled sharply. "Not everything has to be a conspiracy. In my experience, only conspiracies require that sentence." He ended the meeting with a friendly warning. Higher-ups were reviewing open files for unnecessary complications. The message was simple: close the case, or the case might close on me. Even so, I kept digging. The construction company Constructora Villasol had a shiny, clean website full of smiling men in helmets and drone shots of future projects. Too clean. Their real activity, according to an internal financial database I shouldn't have had access to, involved subcontracting to companies with no employees and bank accounts that rarely stayed open longer than 3 months. Classic laundering structure? Textbook almost. One name kept popping up across the subcontractor list: Eugenio Aranda, former Guardia Civil, now security consultant. In Spanish construction circles, that title usually means 2 things. He knows how to scare people, and he knows who to call when scaring isn't enough. I checked his record. Clean. Too clean. A man like that always leaves marks, and someone had scrubbed his. That same night at 3:12 a.m., my car alarm went off. I live on a quiet street near Arganzuela, where people are usually asleep at that hour. I ran down with a baseball bat I keep for sentimental, not legal, reasons. Nobody there. Nothing stolen. But when I looked through the window, the folder on the passenger seat, my folder, was slightly open. Papers shifted. And the glove compartment was left ajar. A message: "We can reach you whenever we want." I didn't report it. Not yet. Reporting it meant paperwork. Paperwork meant supervisors. Supervisors meant the same group trying to bury my case. Sometimes staying quiet buys you time. Sometimes it buys you danger. You learn to gamble. Back at work, I kept an eye on Lucas, the young officer who handled initial logs on the case. Something about him felt off. Nervous in a way that wasn't grief or shock, more like someone carrying a secret that didn't fit in his pocket. I checked phone records for employees who accessed my reports. Lucas had made a short call, 43 seconds, to a number tied to one of Villasol's shell companies. That was too big for coincidence. I waited until he stepped out for a coffee and followed him. He walked to a quiet alley near Lavapiés and made another call. I got close enough to hear fragments. "Yes, he's insisting. No, he doesn't listen." He froze when he turned around and saw me. "Inspector, I was just save it," I said. "Come back to the comisaria." Back inside, I questioned him in a small interview room, the kind with peeling paint and a broken chair. No camera. Deliberate. I needed him scared, not rehearsed. "Who are you calling?" I asked. He stammered something about a friend. I slid a printed call log across the table. "Your friend works for a shell company linked to Villasol." "Then you've got very interesting friends." His eyes darted to the door. "I'm not involved," he whispered. They reached out after I filed the first report." "Who?" "I don't know. A man. Rough voice. Said his name was Eugenio." His face drained. He said I should keep him updated so that the situation didn't get out of hand. Aranda again. The ghost in the paperwork. The man with 2 clean hands. Lucas wasn't guilty. He was small, scared, caught in a machine that didn't care who got crushed. I left him there, trembling. I wasn't proud of it, but fear makes people truthful, and I needed the truth. By midweek, I finally understood why the case made my jefe so nervous. I was reviewing old contracts linked to Villasol when a name jumped out at me like a slap. Concejal Luis Vidal. Urban Planning Committee, City Councilman, and my jefe's brother-in-law. There it was. The pressure, the warnings, the scrubbing of files, it wasn't random. It wasn't bureaucratic laziness, it was protection. Family protection, the kind that stretched through City Hall and police hallways alike. My stomach tightened. I had been walking in the dark, but now I could see the outline of the walls around me. If Diego had been laundering money for Villasol, and Villasol was tied to the concejal, then the man bleeding on the bar floor had been part of someone else's empire. An empire with architects in suits, not alleys. That afternoon, I received a message and invitation to dinner. Private room, upscale restaurant near the Ayuntamiento. The invite implied I should attend. The kind of should that isn't optional. I knew what it meant. A meeting to clarify expectations, to shape the story, to decide whether the inspector lived quietly in his career or didn't live quietly at all. I put on my jacket, checked my phone, checked my keys, said nothing to anyone. When I walked toward the restaurant's private door, I felt it, the weight of crossing an invisible line. The kind that once crossed, you don't step back from. The next step was going to change everything. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know what waited on the other side of that door. The private dining room looked like money, quiet money. Dark wood, linen tablecloth, wine bottles that cost more than my monthly rent. Concejal Luis Vidal sat at the head of the table, smiling the way politicians smile when they're about to insult you politely. Inspector Roldan, he said, standing just enough to pretend he respected me. I'm glad you came. We just want to clear the air. He gestured for me to sit. I took the chair opposite him, the one with the wall at my back. An old habit. I slid my phone out casually, screen down, already recording. He poured wine. I didn't touch mine. You've been very diligent, the concejal said, swirling his glass. But perhaps too curious. Some cases don't require digging. They're simple. A drunk fight, a tragedy, we all move on. What about the missing hour in the time of death? I asked. He smiled like I'd told him a harmless joke. Javier, don't be dramatic. Paperwork can be adjusted. People remember wrong. Cameras fail. You know how it is. He paused, leaned forward. Let me be direct. You close the case as a bar dispute. You avoid trouble. You get peace. Maybe even a nicer assignment. And if I don't? He rested his glass on the table. The sound was soft but final. Then we all lose. I'd heard threats before, louder, cruder ones, but this one landed deeper. Because it came wrapped in courtesy, like a poisoned candy. I let him talk for another 10 minutes. Half-truths, excuses, hints of favors. Every sentence tightening the net around the truth. Diego wasn't killed in the bar. He'd been killed somewhere else by someone cleaning up a financial leak, and the bar scene was a stage play. When the concejal finally leaned back and said, "Think about your future," I stood. "I already have," I said. I left without touching the wine. The whole conversation was on my phone. The next morning, I went straight to internal affairs. Not the whole recording, just enough. Enough to open a door. Enough to nudge the right prosecutor, Fiscal Ortega, a man who still remembered what a conscience felt like. We planned a quiet operation. No fanfare. No heroics. If the network protecting Villasol relied on shadows, we would drag at least one piece of it into daylight. My leverage was Arundhati ex-Guardia turned security chief. If we flipped him, the structure around him would crumble. A meeting was arranged at a half-built construction site. Aranda thought he was giving me a folder explaining the real story of the bar fight. A narrative. A bribe wrapped in paperwork. When I arrived, he was already waiting near a stack of concrete slabs. "You shouldn't have pushed, Inspector," he said. His voice was a gravel pit. "You shouldn't have killed a man and staged it in a bar," I replied. He smirked. I didn't kill him. I just made sure the right people didn't suffer for someone else's mistake. I held his gaze. And what was the mistake? He shrugged. Accountants talk too much. He handed me an envelope. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Behind me, hidden officers closed in quietly. Eugenio Aranda, I said. You're under arrest. He didn't fight. Men like him don't waste energy when the game is already over. He just exhaled, a deep, tired sound, as if he'd been carrying the weight of the whole scheme on his shoulders. He went down calm, but not defeated. People like him rarely feel defeated, just delayed. The fallout was predictable. Aranda faced charges for obstruction, falsifying evidence, and his role in laundering. Several small subcontractors were frozen overnight. Villasol publicly cooperated, then pushed the blame onto lower-level managers. The concejal, of course, walked away untouched. His statement praised the swift resolution of a tragic bar fight and thanked the Policía Nacional for professionalism. My jefe avoided my eyes for days. When we finally crossed paths, he adjusted his tie and said, "You could have handled this differently, Javier." "Maybe," I answered. But then I'd have to look at myself in the mirror. He nodded once a stiff, cold, and walked away. Our working relationship never recovered. As for Lucas, the young officer who got pulled into the current's internal affairs, transferred him to a smaller precinct in Cuenca. A mercy disguised as punishment. He'll either survive long enough to grow a spine or get crushed by someone else's secret. That's the job. The official case file now says, homicidio por riña en establecimiento público. Homicide from a bar altercation. Nothing about laundering. Nothing about political pressure. Nothing about a staged scene. On paper, Madrid got its simple story. When I finally closed my own unofficial file, I felt older than I had 2 weeks earlier. Cases don't kill you, they scrape you, layer by layer. This one took a piece I probably won't get back. I keep thinking about Diego, lying on that bar floor, placed like a prop in someone else's play. A man who tried to swim above dirty money but ended up dragged under anyway. That's the thing people don't understand. Victims aren't always innocent, but even the guilty don't deserve their truth buried with them. What did I learn? That lies are easier to build than apartment blocks. And they last longer too. I tell you this because people like stories with endings. But in this job, endings are just quieter versions of the beginning. Someone gets silenced, someone else gets protected, and the city keeps spinning like nothing ever happened. Sometimes justice is a loud thing. Sometimes it's just a whisper. That night in La Latina, the scene was staged, the story was false, and the pressure was real. But at least I know one thing. I didn't let Madrid close my case before I solved it. And that will have to be enough. People always ask me the same question when they hear this story off camera. Inspector, why do you still bother? If the concejal walks, if the company survives, if your own jefe turns his back, what's the point? I don't give them a heroic answer. I don't have one. The truth is simpler. I don't work for mayors or companies or even for the comisaria. Not really. I work for what I have to live with when I go home at night, when the uniform is on the chair and the badge is on the table. If I lie on paper, the lie doesn't stay on the paper. It moves in. It sits with you at dinner. It follows you into bed. It wakes up with you the next morning. That night in La Latina, the system wanted a clean story. One drunk, one knife, one dead accountant. Madrid likes those short, easy to swallow, good for the next day's headline. Tragic bar fight. Full stop. No follow-up. But behind every simple headline, there's usually someone who worked very hard to make it look simple. In this case, those people had resources, contacts, family ties. They could move files, pressure bosses, scare young officers like Lucas, send men like Aranda to tidy up what was inconvenient. And still, with all that power, they needed one thing from me, my signature under a lie. That's the weak point of every big machine. Somewhere there's a human being who has to sign, and that human being can say no. Of course, saying no has a price. I didn't get a medal, I didn't get promoted. I got a cold hallway and polite silence. The concejal still gives speeches about transparency. My jefe still sits in his despacho, pretending his family name isn't written between the lines of that file. So, what did we really win? We put a man like Aranda in a cell. We froze some accounts. We scared a few suits who now double-check which accountants they use and how obvious their shell companies look. It's not justice with a capital J. It's more like friction. Sand in the gears. But sometimes sand is enough to keep the machine from running as smoothly as it wants. And then there's the other victory, the one no judge can sign. The story survived. They closed it on paper, but they couldn't close it in my head. They couldn't stop me from remembering how the blood trail started on the wrong side of the room, how Lucas's hands shook, how my phone recorded a very polite threat over an expensive bottle of wine. That's why I'm telling it to you here. Because as long as someone hears it, the simple bar fight version never fully wins. The official truth and the real truth have to share space. Uncomfortable roommates. If you're watching this from your sofa, maybe you think all this is faraway politics, money laundering, staged crime scenes. But look around your own city. Anytime a story feels too neat, too fast, too convenient, ask yourself who needed it to be that way. In my world, justice isn't a perfect balance. It's more like trying to keep a door open while someone very strong is pushing it closed from the other side. Most days, you only manage to keep a small gap. But sometimes, on nights like that one in Madrid, you manage to wedge your foot in there before it slams shut. And if all I did was stop them from closing that case exactly the way they wanted, then for me, that night was worth the trouble. This was the night Madrid. Tried to close my case before I solved it. I'm still here. I'm still signing my name where it hurts. And there are more stories in these files than they ever meant you to hear.